Japanese-American director Miki Dezaki is in Korea with his comfort women documentary film, Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue. For over a span of 3 years, he has tracked down vivid stories across Korea, the US, and Japan to make his film. Dezaki's film is distinguished from existing wartime sexual slavery documentaries in that it contains stories about activists who support the victims and interviews of Japan's so-called far-right revisionists. The film had immense repercussions in Japan when it was released there last April. Through the film Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue, director Miki Dezaki says he wants to approach comfort women as a women's rights issue rather than an interstate conflict. We meet with director Miki Dezaki on today's Heart to Heart. Korea celebrates Independence Day on August 15th, known as Gwangbokjeol, which literally translates into bringing back the light in Korean. This year marks the 74th anniversary of Korea's independence from the Japanese colonial rule. And one of the long-standing issues that stems from wartime is the wartime sexual slavery issue. Recently, a film on this issue was released in Korea, and people in the media on the far right in Japan have said, do not watch this film. Today we are joined with Miki Dezaki, director of the documentary film Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue. So hello and welcome to Heart to Heart. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
So when did you actually arrive in Korea?
I arrived on Sunday. Yeah.
So it's been a couple of days?
Yeah, it's been a couple of days.
So now, getting back to the comfort women issue, so you have dug deep into this very controversial comfort women issue, and people in the media in Japan, right-wing, they have said, do not watch this film. And what do you think about this?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised since I did my best to put their opinions in the film without cutting them off or taking them out of context. So I thought they would be interested in seeing the film and kind of getting to know or see their own side and getting to know the other side as well. But it seems as though some of the people in the film are a bit ashamed of what they said, or maybe they're scared of their followers watching the film and possibly being influenced by it. I mean, they are really trying to kind of influence and disseminate their historical perspective in Japan, and maybe they feel like my film is a threat to that agenda.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that you mentioned something about how these things were what these people have actually mentioned before. What you read in articles before, and this is exactly what you hear and see in the film.
Right.
So before we get into more detail, could you go on ahead and tell us about the film?
Yeah, it's a film that basically kind of is a journey to understand this comfort women issue and why people are trying to change the historical narrative. I try to give the audience the same experience that I had. So as I was interviewing these people, both sides were trying to really convince me of their viewpoint, and I try to, give the audience that same exact experience.
Yes.
So yeah, I call it Shusenjo, the main battlefield. I got the name from the far right wingers who are calling America the main battleground of the comfort women issue.
I see.
They believe that if they can kind of convince the Americans of their historical narrative, they can maybe flip history and make it so that everybody believes that these women were just well-paid prostitutes. So I got the word from them, and then I used it more in a metaphorical sense as the mind because I believed my mind was kind of that battlefield, and everybody's trying to win over my mind, and I try to do the same for the audience. Their minds become the battlefield as they're watching both of these arguments.
Oh, wow, that's pretty powerful. So, I mean, especially in documentary films, the cast are very important. The people that actually appear in the film, they are the most important people.
Sure, yeah.
So who are these people that are featured in your film?
They range from politicians, activists, scholars, lawyers, and there's people on the far right side, and there's people on the left side, comfort women supporters, comfort women historical deniers. So I try to give a big range. There's almost 30 people in the film.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of people are represented.
So you even
A lot of
mentioned
views are
that
represented,
you
sorry.
had people from the far right side as well.
Sure.
So was it at all any difficult? I'm sure it wasn't very easy to actually have them agree to be on, do the interviews.
Yeah, so I have sort of a kind of reputation as being anti-Japanese because of my past videos on YouTube on racism in Japan. So I think they were a bit hesitant to do the interview with me, but I believe that they wanted to use me in some way. So they have kind of a campaign to change the minds of Americans. And being an American, they probably thought, oh, maybe if we can get him on our side, we can really use this guy for our own campaign. So interestingly, they weren't as difficult as people on the left wing to interview. Yeah, people on the left, they are afraid of getting attacked. Because it tends to be the far right wingers who attack the left wingers. So one person who was interviewed, who's the director, I believe, of this Comfort Women Museum in Tokyo, her museum got a bomb threat, I believe, a couple months or a year, or maybe a year before I interviewed them. So she was very concerned about doing any kind of media that might cause more threats to her.
But she did eventually.
She did eventually do the
Agreed to do
interview,
the
which
interview.
I was very grateful for.
So you just mentioned that there were about 30 people that you interviewed.
Yeah.
So the film is based on 30 or more interviews.
Right.
But I understand that you had to edit all of this from more than 50 hours, like 50 plus hours of video like footage.
Right.
What did you focus most in the editing process? Because as I've mentioned, there was a lot to edit,
Yeah.
a lot of video footage that you had actually recorded, and you had to only include a section of it, a very small section of it. So what did you focus most on when it came to editing?
So when you see the film, you can notice that there are a lot of arguments in the film and a lot of debating, discussion. I wanted to put the most persuasive arguments from both sides. I didn't want to take anything out. And that's kind of to the detriment of the film itself, because 2-hour films are not really desired by a lot of film festivals. They want an hour and a half. So, but I thought it was really important to put the most persuasive arguments in there so that I didn't get criticized for taking something out to conveniently support my view at the end or something like that. So I put a lot of information in there, and the most important thing was to make it entertaining enough that people will watch it, right? Having been a teacher in the past, I know that if you don't present things in a good way, people fall asleep, and I didn't want people to fall asleep in my film.
Nobody will fall asleep in your
Yeah,
film,
thanks.
watching your film. I'd also like to ask you about a realization that possibly hit you hard while doing research, because you did much research.
Yeah. I guess a realization that I found that was kind of critical to how I analyzed or kind of made my conclusions was that both sides of the argument tend to imagine what they, or I guess they have this idea of what a sex slave is or what course of recruitment is. And there are actual like legal definitions to this in international law and even domestic laws. So I thought it was really important to present that to the audience, to say that, okay, we all have this imagination of what a slave is, getting chained up or
Right.
something, locked in a room,
Forced
but
to
it's
do
not
something.
necessarily that. The idea of a slave is more about how you control a person. And that might not necessarily have to be with chains or anything, but it's just, this kind of system of control. And they may be able to leave, to go to the park or
Right.
something, but because they need permission to do that, that still makes them under what they call total control in international law, and that can make them a slave.
So now I'd like to ask you about what it was that drew your attention to this issue and what actually motivated you to make a film. I know that you briefly mentioned that it was a graduation project.
Yeah.
But why this issue?
Yeah, so I came to know or really get interested in the comfort woman issue after realizing that there was this Asahi Shimbun journalist who was getting bashed for his articles, just like I got bashed for my racism in Japan video. And I was just wondering why they wanted to cover up this issue. What made this issue so special that they were willing to put so much effort into bashing it. So yeah, that just kind of piqued my interest. And then when I started doing the research myself, I noticed that there was this huge gap in information between what Japanese people knew and Korean people knew. And I think this is what kind of contributes to the hatred between each other and the misunderstandings and the fighting. So I thought with a documentary film, a 2-hour documentary film, I could maybe fill that gap, give some more context, and hopefully this would lessen the hatred between the two groups, and then possibly lead to better discussions or more
Right.
productive discussions.
I mean, a lot of time, effort, energy, a lot of everything went into creating this film. Was there at any point a time that you felt maybe I should just give up?
Lots of times.
Yeah, lots of times.
Yeah, I just thought that this issue was just too big and too complex for my first film on a shoestring budget. Basically, no one else but me and a couple friends kind of doing this. So I just thought it was impossible to make the film that I really wanted to make. Luckily, it turned out pretty decent. Good enough, I think. But yeah, there were so many times I really wanted to quit. But I think what kind of drove me to the finish line was knowing that this could possibly help in some way, knowing that there hasn't been really a comfort women documentary like this. And I wanted to just at least share the information that I found. And I thought maybe it could benefit some people.
Now, has being a Japanese American director influenced or have any effect on the film production? On this
Sure.
film?
I think it was a huge factor. I don't think I could have made this particular film had I not been Japanese American. There were a lot of interviewees who said, like Korean interviewees who said, if you were just Japanese, I would have never did the interview. I think, as I said before, the far right wingers, they liked the idea that I was Japanese American so that they could use me. Actually, a lot of Japanese Americans, second generation, third generation in America don't really support their views. So they thought maybe I could help convince that group, possibly. So yeah, I think it was really beneficial. I think being a male was also really beneficial in the sense that the right-wingers probably trusted a male to be more objective on this issue or more rational
than a female. That's true. Are there any things that did not or could not make it to the film?
Yeah,
Something you might share with us on the show today?
there was an interview with a German historian, and I wanted to get his thoughts on how Germany teaches its history versus how Japan teaches its history. And interestingly, what I found was that in Germany, they didn't really accept their war atrocities until much later. We tend to think that they accepted it right away after the war, but there were a lot of people who denied it at first. And it took a lot of pushing from the public to force their politicians to accept this history and then teach it the way it is now, which is interesting because that just shows that maybe there is hope in Japan, that if enough people, if the public really pushes its government to teach this, that they might, change, and maybe some kind of reconciliation and teaching of the history might happen.
And we have much more to talk about.
Great.
But the film was released in Korea quite recently, last month on the 25th of July.
Right.
And we would like to take a peek of the documentary film. Here is Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue. The film Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue, is causing huge controversy in 2019. Director Miki Dezaki has steadily delved into the issue without conceding to Japanese far right. The film Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue, was released in Korea on July 25th, which then caught the attention of many people. It is also receiving attention worldwide as it contains criticisms toward governments of Korea, the US, and Japan. Director Miki Dezaki is here to give us more details. Now, the film was released in Japan 3 months prior to its release in Korea in April.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what kinds of responses did you receive from the general Japanese audiences who watched the film?
It's been amazingly positive. I didn't expect Japanese people to be interested in the comfort women issue at all. A lot of people don't even know about the comfort women issue, and the ones who do know about it are quite fatigued about hearing about it, especially because they think that Korea just pushes this on Japan so much. But it's also a very taboo topic in Japan. So the fact that a lot of people are interested in the film and tweeting about it all the time and telling other people to see it is really surprising. I never expected this kind of reaction. And the nice thing is that the comfort women issue, I think, is becoming less and less taboo because of that. So yeah, I'm really, really happy about that. Of course, there are people who really don't like the film, but it tends to be people who haven't seen the film who don't like the film.
I see.
So maybe they saw the articles or the videos by the far right wingers, and saying, just repeating what they said, that I am a liar and I made a fake documentary or something like that.
I did see the interviews that you did with, I think, teenagers, Japanese teenagers, and some of them really were not aware of this at all. They didn't know about the comfort women issue at all. I was surprised to see that as well.
Actually, I would say the majority do not know about the comfort women issue. If they do know about it, it's just from some news reports about the statues or maybe the comfort women agreement that happened in 2015. But I have former students, because I used to teach in Japan, who send me messages saying, I just saw your film and it's a total shock. Like, I don't even know how to process all this because I didn't even know about the issue, and all these things about the government and trying to hide it or change the textbooks is just so shocking because they've never heard any of this information before. And so, I'm really glad that I can let people know what's happening in Japan. I think when Japanese people don't know about this issue, it really handicaps them, and it kind of makes them look silly to the world population that knows about the comfort women issue, and they say, well, I don't know anything about it, and then people are just like, well, how do you not know about this, right? It's your own history. So I hope that my film will give them the information that they can be kind of world citizens and kind of participate in, kind of political and social discussions.
Now, you mentioned something about textbooks as well.
Yeah.
And the film also dealt with the Japanese history textbook issue as well.
Yeah.
So is it about what schools teach or what they don't teach, what they leave out, I guess purposely? Tell us about this.
So since 1997, they've been slowly taking out mention of the comfort women issue. And I believe in 2012 it was completely eliminated from all textbooks in junior high school in Japan. Since then, I think one textbook has included it, but it's really minimal. It's barely taught. So that's a huge issue. On top of that, there's this thing called the center exam that all the students have to take to get into college.
Okay.
And this exam does not really touch on or test on World War II issues. So most of the students don't care to learn about it because it's not important for their future, right? So even if it were in the textbooks, if it's not in the exam, the parents and the students are like, well, why are we spending time on this? We should be learning about the history that's going to help me pass this exam. So that's a flaw in probably the education system, not just the textbooks, but how education or how people are, being educated for college and these exams.
Now, Japan's export restriction measures, I mean, they've recently worsened, Korea-Japan relations, and yet you still released your film. So I want to ask you how different it felt. What did it feel like when the film was released here in Korea compared to how it felt when it was opened in Japan?
Yeah, in Japan, it was, it definitely didn't have the, I guess, the kind of buzz that it had. In Japan, it kind of took time. It was a gradual kind of, people sort of word of mouth kind of thing. Whereas in Korea, it seemed like it's all just like one shot. I'm doing interviews constantly about the film. And in a certain, I joke that Prime Minister Abe, advertised my film, and I have him to thank for how popular it is in Korea right now. But yeah, it's totally different. Interestingly, radio and newspapers are pretty much the only media in Japan that will cover this film. There's no TV that will cover my film. And that is interesting because I think they don't want a wider audience to get to know this film. So even though it's been popular in Japan and it's gotten quite a bit of press in newspaper and radio, it has, I think TV has that bigger impact, and I don't think it'll happen in Japan, unfortunately.
But it's definitely happening or spreading across the world as well. I mean, to the States, even to Europe. Right. Not only in Japan and Korea, but it's spreading to other places as well.
And actually, I have the so-called revisionists in the film to thank for that. After they announced that they were going to sue me, all these articles wrote about it, and the schools and organizations in Europe and America got really interested in the film and started asking me to screen it. So it's the revisionists, so-called revisionists, who advertised it for me, and also Prime Minister Abe with his trade restrictions that help advertise the film. So maybe I should thank them.
Right, and the remarks, as I've mentioned at the beginning of the show, do not watch this film.
Yeah,
by
definitely.
the media right, in Japan as
It's
well.
funny because I saw sometimes far right-wing YouTube videos that say don't watch the film, and they're saying if you say that, I'm gonna want to watch
Even
the
more.
film. Yeah. So they're not too aware of the effect they're having.
I understand your point fully. Now, lastly, I'd like to ask you, the film opened in Japan first in April,
Yeah.
and then in July, it opened in
Yeah.
Korea. Where next? The next destination, which country tops that list?
I would love to show it in the U.S. I mean, I think I will actually be showing it in some universities. I'll be doing a tour in September and October around all over the U.S. I think it's important for Americans to see it. There's a huge American element in the film. You can see how America has actually influenced how Japan and Korea has treated the comfort women issue, and there's a lot of American pressure that's been applied. So I want Americans to understand what their government is doing abroad as well.
I'd like to thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah,
I know
thank
you're on
you
a
for
very
having
tight
me.
schedule.
Yeah.
Just got to Korea just a couple of days ago. I hope that you remember and cherish and love every moment you spend here in Korea.
Thank you so
very
much. I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you. Now, as director Miki Dezaki has mentioned, we need to remember that the so-called comfort women issue is not a pending issue between countries, but it is a human rights issue that needs to be resolved, and it requires the victims' voices to be heard. Thank you very much for tuning in to Heart to Heart today. I'll catch you again next time. Thanks for watching.